Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm good. I was about to say, hey, and then I realized that we weren't live yet. There's a little bit of a delay here, folks, so we apologize in advance for that. But hey, it wouldn't be unscripted if things went according to plan.
Correct. Correct. And I just have to say before we bring our fabulous guest on today that meeting you in person was truly like the highlight of I don't even know what period of time.
The last 5 years. I don't know. How
Oh
long
my
have we known each other now in the online space?
Probably 5 years. Yeah.
Probably
It's been a
5,
while.
right? Or
Yeah.
3 to 5, somewhere in that. Folks, we just barely met in person in the flesh earlier this month. We're not even November yet. Earlier this month, we got the chance to go to a mutual client's launch party in New Jersey. So Vermont and Connecticut, and we met in the middle. And I cannot even tell you the hilarity that ensued when we were together in the flesh.
Can you imagine if there were like a camera or anything recording anything that occurred?
I know. I cannot. Yeah.
It would be on brand.
Unscripted on steroids.
It
was a good time. It was a good time. I love you so much. I adore you.
Oh my God. And I think the best part of the Unscripted, which I will not share the photos because they just really didn't come out well, is that we did have the best of intentions rolling into our in-person meeting. And we had matching outfits and we were going to do some photos. That way we could kind of like zhuzh up our Unscripted brand for 2026. And we epically failed in the most on-brand unscripted fashion possible.
I know, which just kind of makes me feel like we need to figure out how to use them, just because
there's got to be one
too perfect to like what this whole thing is about. So in true unscripted fashion, my friends, we are here with another episode. And today I'm really excited about this topic. Like, even though for most people, like the idea of defamation and lawsuits and being sued is terrifying, I can't even emphasize how many times these particular questions come up in the work that I do with authors preparing their manuscripts, because in the nonfiction space, whether it's prescriptive nonfiction or it's memoir, people are super concerned about talking about other people who still are alive and exist and what that means for them in this kind of legal realm of things. And Jen, I'm sure that you get similar questions as a publisher, or have your own specific concerns when you're looking at a manuscript as a publisher.
Yeah. And I can't wait to start diving in with Catherine, because I have my own personal questions that I would love answered.
So we have a fabulous guest with us here today. Catherine Goldman is going to be joining us here in a moment. Catherine is an intellectual property and internet law attorney who helps creative professionals protect their work so they can profit from it. She believes sustainable businesses are built on property protective creative assets. Catherine has assisted countless artists, writers, designers, and creative entrepreneurs with the move from early stage idea to startup essentials to scaling their businesses and ultimately to sale or wrap up. Catherine practices law in Baltimore, Maryland with the firm Goldman and Minton, but is also associated with the Creative Law Center. Maybe, Catherine, we can start there and you can tell us the difference between the two. Welcome, Catherine. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invitation and being here. But before I get to the Creative Law Center and the difference between the law firm and the Creative Law Center, I just want to say that New Jersey is not halfway between Connecticut and Vermont.
Oh, I meant we were going and meeting like where we could. But
I got it. But the whole geography thing, just, you know.
Yeah, okay. It's true. It's not anywhere near halfway between the two of us. You're right.
The Creative Law Center. So I've been practicing law for a lot of years, almost 40 years. And so Goldman and Minton is my law firm, and I have a partner, and we've been together for decades. And I started the Creative Law Center when I stopped doing trial work. And I wanted to put together a separate place where I could gather resources to help creative professionals, artists, authors, photographers, anybody who creates something that they then build a business on. And I wanted to put together resources for that type of individual or company to spread the word. And so that's what I've been doing. It started as a blog, and then it grew into a membership site, and I do monthly workshops and all kinds of things. And so that's the Creative Law Center. And then Goldman and Minton is the law firm. And so when clients hire me, I work through the law firm.
Wow.
Wonderful.
It's exciting. I just pulled up your website in my other screen so I can dive into it a little bit later.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm going to put it in the comments for folks. Those of you joining us from YouTube, you'll see it there automatically. Those who might be coming in from LinkedIn, we'll make sure that we get it in there into the comments after the fact, though I think we do already have it plugged into the description of today's episode. But definitely, this is a person to know. You want to know what Catherine is up to. She's got fabulous workshops that she runs through the Creative Law Center. So sign up for the email list so that you're always in the know. Jen, where do you want to kick off our conversation?
I feel like it is such a large topic, especially for the two of us who work with authors all day. And I guess because there's so many different things, and like the topic really of what we kind of landed on was like defamation, and really trying to find that line that authors, writers, I think anyone writing about somebody else perhaps has to walk to not fall into a trap where they're going to get themselves in legal trouble. So is there any just kind of, I guess, overarching way to look at your writing? I guess maybe we can start there and kind of like tease out from that point.
Sure. So let's start with what defamation is. Okay. And so what defamation is, it is a publication of a statement of fact that is false, right? And you don't have a right to say it, okay? And it causes damage to the person you're saying it about, all right? So it has to be published, meaning it has to be said to a third party, not directly to the person, right? So you guys work in book publishing, so that's publication. But saying something out loud in a public space can also be publication, okay? So it's sharing a statement of fact, you said it as fact, and it's false, and it causes harm, damage to that person. Reputational harm is mostly the kind of harm that we're talking about. So that's what defamation is. And so when you're writing nonfiction, you know, or creative nonfiction or a memoir, you are constantly working with your view of the facts, your interpretation of the facts. And so the thing to think about, I'm going to give you the gem defense to defamation right at the top of the show. And that is, if you have any question about whether you're at risk for a claim for defamation, then phrase your work as an opinion. Because then you're not stating a fact. And opinions are not actionable. You cannot get sued for your opinion. Well, you might get sued for it, but they won't win. Okay. You cannot control who's going to sue you, but you can control whether you have a defense to a lawsuit. And so framing something as an opinion is going to give you that defense to defamation.
Okay. So I have a follow-up question then.
Okay.
Memoir as a genre, right, is really the author's story. So in some ways, memoir means it's the author's perspective. It's coming through their lens. Is that enough of a defense against defamation, or within the writing itself, should memoirists still be careful to ensure that they are writing particular scene, perhaps with a character in it, as this is what I recall, this is my perspective of this moment, or can they just let it fly because memoir as a genre covers them?
No, I don't think relying on the memoir as a genre is going to provide a strong enough defense. And so what I would do, and what I tell my clients who are writing memoirs, is to make sure in the disclaimer on the copyright page, you explain what the genre means, what memoir means. It means that it's my recollection, my interpretation, and that other people might have a different recollection. Okay. So I start with put that disclaimer in there. So, because that bolsters the notion that you're looking at the life through a lens, and it's your lens, right? And other people might have a different lens. So put it on the disclaimer page. The second thing that I recommend, there are a lot of different recommendations for memoir, but one is, it seemed to me that he was behaving, like a crook or whatever it is. It seemed to me, pepper your work with those kind of softening statements, as opposed to, he was a crook. All right. That's a statement of fact. Okay. No, it seemed to me like he was a crook. Mm-hmm. Now you've softened it. Now it's an opinion. Now you're building a defense.
That makes a lot of sense. Can I ask about the disclaimer? Like, are there certain varying weights of a disclaimer? Because in the books that we publish, we always have a disclaimer in the front, regardless of what the topic is. And we have slightly different variations for nonfiction versus a memoir. But is any blanket disclaimer going to be helpful, or are there certain things that one should have to really help protect you?
Well, so I think disclaimers can be very creative also. And I think that you can express your theme in your disclaimer. So you can set your book up in the disclaimer. And in that way, if you say that, the facts are through my lens and these are my opinions and not necessarily anyone else's opinions, then that's going to be helpful. So, the more clear the disclaimer is, the more powerful it's going to be as a defense.
One more follow-up, and then I'm going to throw it back to you, Ally.
Okay.
In the disclaimers, so we always have not always, a lot of our books have a dear reader, where it's just kind of the author speaking to the reader. And a lot of times it kind of is that creative thing that you were just saying, where it's this is my recollection of the experiences. And the disclaimer is a little bit more, certainly not legally, but more legally. Is that combination, could the dear reader still function as protection?
Absolutely. And it might even be stronger. And the reason is because someone is going to read the dear reader and may not read the disclaimer.
Yeah.
Right. One thing I have 2 points here. First of all, dear readers can be great, especially in memoir. If someone is writing about their experience with a medical condition, for instance, right? And they just say, I am not a doctor, all right, but I lived through this. And so this is my experience, and this may not be your experience. And, you need to check with medical professionals and all that kind of thing. So that can be very helpful in those situations. The other thing that I want to be sure that people understand is that if you're selling ebooks, which everybody is, you want to make sure that the disclaimer and the dear reader are part of the preview that's offered on Amazon, because you want that to be clear at the time of the purchase of the book.
I love it. And now we can just end, because now we have that golden nugget and our minds are blown.
Yeah, we're done. Okay.
Thank you, Catherine, for your excellent guidance and mic drop. This is why I love doing this each month, because for as many things that Jen and I know after being in this space for as long as we have, we are still learning so many new wonderful things, especially through our guests. So thank you so much for that. I would never have even thought of that. Although I'm not producing ebooks, I'm working on manuscripts behind the scenes. That's more Jen's forte, but I'm glad to know it, because now I can pass that on.
You can pass it along, right? And these are the little things that I like to put into my blog posts at the Creative Law Center. This is the little nugget. This is the little gem. This is what's going to make you confident, to go forth and do your work. That, you shouldn't have to pay $1 million to a lawyer to learn.
Right. So I want to go back to the statement about the crook.
Okay. All right.
What if in your story, and this is still memoir land that we're kind of in, and we should probably migrate away from memoir land here in a second. But what if you have proof that this person is a crook? Like, what if they were in a newspaper and there's a whole article on them that proves that they were a part of illegal activity? Or what if you were a part of a trial or court proceeding that's public knowledge that would indicate you were the defendant or something, right? Like, if you have actual public documentation that backs up a statement, what should you do then? Is that still defamation, or have you proven that it's fact?
Right. Okay. So that's a great question. You've been responsible in terms of researching the story that you're going to tell using reliable sources. Okay, so you've been responsible, you haven't been negligent, and you are confident that this is a fact, and you have the primary source material to back that up. So the burden, so truth is a defense, right? You've heard that a lot. Truth is a defense to defamation. And so the burden is going to be on you as a defendant, if you get sued, to show that it is the truth, and that therefore you haven't been negligent in your publication. All right. So we have to remember that defamation is a civil wrong, not a criminal wrong, right? So you haven't been negligent. You have the facts. That's going to be a defense to defamation. What you have to keep in mind is that if you are sued, the time that in the process of a lawsuit where you're proving your facts is almost at the end of the process. It's at a stage called summary judgment. And this is after depositions have been taken and documents have been exchanged. And that comes right before trial, right? And if you don't win on summary judgment, then you're going to trial. So relying on the truth as a defense is not going to prevent a long, drawn out, expensive process. And so that's what you have to keep in mind. And you have to decide whether you are prepared for that process.
So does it help at all to have cited and sourced the primary documentation that you have along the memoir to stop anything from getting all the way down that road? Like,
yes, it absolutely does. So typically what happens, the process is, okay, somebody that you've written about in your book is all up in arms and they want to sue you for defamation, and they go to a lawyer and they sit down with the lawyer and they convince that lawyer that this is defamatory, this is a false statement, and you want to sue. Now, if the lawyer looks at the book and sees a list of citations in the back that point to reliable sources that in fact this is true, it's unlikely the lawyer's going to take the case. Unlikely. Not, it's improbable even. So that can prevent a claim from even being filed. Now, let's assume that the lawyer does take the case. The first thing that usually happens is a demand letter, right? Now, some people go straight for a lawsuit if the book is being published and they want to stop the publication, they want to stop the sale of the books. Some lawyers will go straight for injunctive relief, it's called. But usually there's a demand letter. And if you have your facts organized, right, and you can go to your lawyer and say, here's the proof of those facts, then there can be a response to that demand letter that lays out all the facts, and then the lawyer may decide not to bring the case. One of the things that I do, and I've worked with some of your clients, is I do clearances on the manuscript, and I put together the defense in anticipation that there might be a claim of defamation, or we still haven't spoken about invasion of privacy, right? Or rights of publicity. And I can put together the defense in a memo, and then if a claim does come, then the response is right there. It's already done. And the faster that response is, the less you are, throwing off your back foot, the less likely there is going to be a claim filed against you.
Could there be a scenario where an author has done, because through our editing process, and if someone's working with a ghostwriter, a lot of this stuff's kind of already cleaned up before it would even make it to publication, which is why I think working with appropriate editors really is a huge piece of just the publishing equation. But could it be that someone is, maybe they're not directly stating it, but maybe it's go read a blog on my website, or go listen to this podcast I did with somebody, or something where they're pulling them out of the book and telling them to go somewhere else. And in that other place, there is some kind of defamation potential. Does that give the person that they're speaking about any authority to go after the book itself? Or is or does it kind of like go after the person who's, speaking ill of them, whether it's written, verbal, etc.?
That's a very interesting question. Whoever wrote it, the author, the claim will be against the author. Mm-hmm. I've not had that situation. Generally the claim goes against the source of the publication itself. Mm-hmm. So I think that's an argument that might protect the book and the publisher, because the publication, the the false statement of fact is not in the book itself. Mm-hmm. That very well could be a defense. I hadn't thought about that one.
Yeah. Well, we are always very, careful with our authors and making sure that they're not doing anything that's going to put any of us in legal action. But I'm thinking of like mm-hmm. self-published authors where they have no idea what they're doing and they're just kind of like proceeding anyway. And I think that's where maybe more of these situations potentially occur. Is that kind of something that you see in terms of people who are reaching out to you? Is there a certain path of publishing potentially that is more susceptible than others?
Well, I work with a lot of self-published authors, and a lot in the memoir area. And that is definitely a concern that comes up. But the people who work with me and who come to me and who hire me are aware of the risk, and they want to mitigate that risk. And that's why they come to me in the first place. I don't do litigation anymore. I don't go to trial anymore. I have handled my fair share of defamation cases, but I don't do that anymore. So if somebody hasn't come to me for clearance in the first place and they get sued, I don't represent them.
Yeah. Ally, do you see the question in the comments?
I do. I'm going to field that over to Catherine here in a moment. I just want to say that, so I have personally consulted with Catherine on projects, and, even with Catherine not being a litigant anymore, a litigator. You have provided so much expertise for myself and for clients to make them understand what is the possibility, the kind of like the risk analysis, if you will, as well as just really helpful tips and strategies to approach the material in a way that still feels authentic to them and telling their story while also covering their butt. Because the last thing that we want, right? Memoirists typically not writing about light and fluffy things, right? So the last thing that we want is for a memoirist to suffer a second time by being the victim of a lawsuit, right? When they're just simply trying to tell their truth. So the conversations that I've had with Catherine in a consultative basis, have just they've been kind of like game changers, in all honesty, in terms of really making the authors feel like they are doing their due diligence and can still tell their side of the story. So just a little shout out, kudos to Catherine and speaking with her. And you want to do it now. Be preventative, not reactive. Right? Like you don't want to have to respond to something later. So catch things up front. So we do have a comment. This person says, I'm writing a book about DV within my military marriage to a high-ranking official and my escape. I will write under a pen name, use fake names of people involved, and change locations. Can you recommend any other methods to cover myself?
Okay, so fictionalizing the whole story is a good start. You have to be careful. The point of fictionalizing is so that somebody doesn't identify themselves in your story and then sue you because of something that you've said. Fictionalizing is a very good way to protect yourself, because if the story, again, you said it, Ally, it's not light and fuzzy memoirs, right? I mean, you're writing a memoir. It's only worth reading if there is some trauma that you have overcome, right? And so if you're writing about the source of that trauma and you fictionalize it, you are giving yourself a layer of protection. And then you have to consider whether, if that person reads the book and recognizes him or herself in the book, are they going to out themselves by saying, she's writing about me and I didn't cause that trauma, right? And so that is, you have to understand, okay, who's the person, what's at risk for them for outing themselves. And so that goes into the calculus of weighing, your risk, mitigating your risk. And I find that once you've fictionalized, it is unlikely that the person who has caused the trauma is going to out themselves. Mm-hmm. Unless you hit it big and Hollywood comes knocking. And all of a sudden, you're on the bestseller list for the New York Times and you're making $1 million, and then they're going to want a piece of it. And so, I mean, that could be a good problem and a bad problem, right? Because then the publicity that happens is just more publicity for the book. So, but that's the situation those are all the little variables that you have to consider. But fictionalizing is a really good way to protect yourself.
Can I ask a technical question on the fictionalizing side? Because I often say this to authors, very similar to what you were just saying. Like, they kind of like, someone's going to have to out themselves and like raise their hand of like, hey, I'm the abuser in this situation. And if you fictionalize it enough, you don't really have to worry about that. But is there, like, because from a marketing standpoint, marketing under a pen name can be really, really challenging, especially as a memoir. We have a number of authors that are kind of in that situation, and it makes it really tricky. But if we're saying fictionalizing, we could interpret that in two ways. One, where you're fictionalizing the memoir and it's still written as a memoir and published as a memoir, or you are actually publishing it as a fiction book. Are there different implications depending on that path?
Well, so writing fiction that is based on life experience, right? And so, but you've changed things. You've made it more dramatic. You've made it more traumatic. You've made the transition, greater. And so writing fiction based on life experience is going to be probably give you more protection than writing as a fictionalized memoir. And you're absolutely right. In terms of marketing, I've had a number of clients who write their memoir because they want to reach out, share their story with other people who are in a similar situation, right? And I represented a man who was abused as a child, and he by a coach, and he not only did he not fictionalize his story, but he went to the state legislature and had a law enacted, fought for a law to be enacted, right? So he is telling his story, and he got that law passed, and that coach, I believe, went to jail, right? So you have to think about what your mission is. What is your purpose in writing your memoir? If you use a pen name and your purpose is to spread the word, to let other people know that they're not the only ones who have suffered this way, there's no publicity that you can do with a pen name, really. You can, I mean, you could do some podcasts under your pen name, but you couldn't do this talk show. You've got to really think about what your goal is, who you're trying to reach, why you're trying to reach them. And then ultimately, if you are going to do marketing, if it's more than just exercising your demons, you really have to think hard about using a pen name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure does.
It brings up a lot of like some of the, I think, the nuances or intricacies of the publishing space, right? When Jen and I talk in other shows about genre and choosing genre, right? Like it has to do with visibility and categorization and metadata and where the book falls on the bookshelf and within brick and mortar stores, and how do the people who are selling the book on your behalf place the book among others, right? And so genre by itself can be kind of this tricky thing when you're trying to figure out like, well, wait a minute, memoir is supposed to be based on my true experience. If I'm fictionalizing the memoir, then how do people trust what I'm saying as a reliable narrator, right? But then if I write fiction and I base it off of my true story, and I'm now a fiction author and I'm writing fiction, there's a whole different strategy there of marketing and promotion. And then you throw the pen name into the mix and it's just an added layer, right? Because if you're using your real name, but promoting your fiction book, right? There's some different ways that you could strategize around how much you out yourself as this story being based on your actual reality and how much has been fictionalized or dramatized, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're using a pen name and now it's not really a real identity and you're having to create an entire persona around it on top of choosing genre, you end up in a very extra complicated ecosystem, I think. An ecosystem that's already hard, I think, for first-time authors to navigate to begin with. Mm-hmm. Right. And then, of course, depending on where you're at in maybe dealing with your trauma, healing from your trauma, confronting your trauma, and then whether or not the people you're writing about are still a present force in your life, like it's this like, almost this perfect storm of like, which way do you go and not really knowing what path to take.
Right. And so my role, unlike your roles, is to help them assess what the risk is with respect to those paths. We always necessarily touch on, what the marketing options are going to be, what the PR options are going to be, when using a pen name or not, or fictionalizing or not. But my role is to assess what the risk is based on those choices. All right, if I go this way, what's the risk? If I go this way, what's the risk? And then the decision for the writer, for the author, becomes, what is the risk I am willing to accept with publication? Mm-hmm. Right? And then those other really practical things that you're talking about, that comes into play. So you have to make these fundamental choices first, and then you have to play with those layers of complexity in the publishing industry, and whether simplifying that outweighs the choice that you've made when writing the book.
I think that makes a lot of sense. What about when folks are writing about immediate family members? Because I think that's like a big old gray area that even, someone in Michael in the chat had said that the person created fictional names for the characters. And, Ally and I both have memoirs. We both also fictionalize names, but like it still wouldn't be difficult to figure out who my mother is, regardless of what I changed her name to. So like, how do authors handle that?
Well, exactly. I mean, you can fictionalize your mother's name. And you can do that for certain reasons, knowing that she's going to be identifiable. If you use your real name, as the author, she's going to be identifiable to people who know you and to people who read the book. But what's not going to happen is her name's not going to pop up in Google searches. Mm-hmm. It's not going to pop up in, AI chatbot answers, right? As connected with this book. So there is a layer of protection that you can give to family members, to your mom, by changing her name, but she will be identifiable to those who know you.
And what about authors that are writing about trauma and the source of the trauma was a parent or a sibling or a close family member? I feel like it's so hard to like actually protect that person. And usually what I talk to authors about is, like, write your truth, write your perspective and your truth. Just don't be writing it in absolutes. And it's a little bit of kind of what you were saying before, but I don't know if that's enough.
Well, it really depends on the circumstances of the, where are the relationships now? Are the people still alive? That's item number one. Was there a criminal investigation? Was there a social services investigation? Is this already public record? So all of these facts play a role in those decisions. What are the emotions of the writer involved? Is there just an incredible anger? Is there a need for revenge? So all of these things play a role. And again, what I try to do is say, all right, let's take the emotion out of it. Let's look at what the risk is. Who is this person, and is this person going to turn around and file a claim against you? And it might be just a demand letter, but it might end up being a full-blown lawsuit. So again, it's so fact specific as to each person, because everybody's trauma is different, and the way they talk about that trauma is going to be different. So you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, which you guys have been doing.
I'm so glad that you brought up intent, though, because one of the things that I'm always trying to weigh with my authors, especially my memoirists, is like, where are they at emotionally with the material? And there's no exact moment, right? I can't say like 3 years beyond when the trauma has occurred, you'll be ready, right? Like that's different for everybody. But what I do find to be true is if you are specifically coming to the work of writing your story because you want to get somebody back, you want the karma to finally find their way around, you want them to know how it feels to be ashamed and embarrassed. Like, if your motivations are still, and I'm not saying that these motivations are wrong. I think all of us who have been through something at some point go through this stage where it's like we are angry and we might want the other person to suffer. So, I'm not saying that those are feelings that you shouldn't have or you shouldn't work through, but they're not the foundation from which you should be using it as a springboard to tell your story. Not only will you eventually not feel good about it once you come to or through that emotion and you end up in a place perhaps of understanding or acceptance, right? But I feel like you're only kind of making it more difficult for yourself to be able to look at the manuscript objectively to say, did I cross a legal line here for which this will cause me more harm, like later on?
Right, exactly. So if you are writing your story to intentionally hurt someone, then the chances are good or better that you're not going to have a defense to defamation. I'm doing this to hurt this person, right? That's not going to play well with the judge. That is not going to play well, that intent to hurt. And to your point, it doesn't make a good story. I actually am not interested in your personal revenge. I am interested in your transformation out of the trauma. Yeah. I'm interested in how the trauma impacted the course of your life and where you are now. And I want to see, I ultimately like to read for a happy ending, right? I want to see that you've accomplished something positive. Trauma doesn't end for people. There are some traumas that don't go away, but life keeps going, right? And so I want to see how you're dealing with that. And I'm not interested in your revenge. So A, it's not going to help you legally, and B, as a reader, that doesn't interest me. But that's me.
So I have a question then, because one of the things that I often tell my people who are still struggling with some of these emotions is like, go ahead and write it all out, because nobody's seeing it yet, but you, right?
Right.
So I often say, draft to make a mess, draft raw, draft to try to figure your way through to meaning, and then you revise to polish and to cut back and to clean up and to make it ready for prime time. And what you spill onto the page is not what needs to be put out into the world. But if they were to be sued, would those earlier drafts be a part of discovery or a part of the legal process for which there would be some sort of argument to be made that they were doing it with some ill intent?
They may be part of discovery. Okay, so I could see a request for production of documents that would ask for all versions of the manuscript. Okay. However, defamation is based on the publication of a statement of fact. And so if the earlier drafts weren't published, or shared with beta readers, right? That's publication. Then it's irrelevant to the underlying claim and wouldn't come into evidence. So it might come out in discovery, but it's likely that a judge would prevent it from coming into evidence. It's not admissible because it's not a publication.
I love that you just brought up beta readers, though, because you said earlier at the top of this, like it's just, one person, it can be publication, and beta readers are something that so many authors have. And I'm not sure that would be something that would be an immediate thought, because it's like, oh, a beta reader, that's someone private. We're communicating before it goes out to other people. But in this case, that still applies. So
nope, that's really a publication. Good. Sending to a beta reader would be a publication. But that would be a thin basis for basing a defamation claim on, because then there has to be damage to reputation. And if you've just sent it to, let's say you've sent it to 5 beta readers who have no idea what this person does or wouldn't be involved with that person's business, it's unlikely that would be damaging to their reputation. So that would miss that element of the claim. There would be publication of a false statement of fact, but it wouldn't end up damaging the person who was the subject. And so that would be defensible. They wouldn't be able to make the elements of the claim.
Unless maybe the beta readers were the top 5 clients of this person that you're writing about. In that case, there'd probably be a very nice, strong claim for it.
And there would also be a strong claim for intent. Yeah. I think to be malicious.
Yeah. But also, why would you have chosen those people as your beta readers? So
right, just to be mean.
Right. So I think, to me, this solidifies something that Jen and I talk about with beta readers, which is that beta readers are not meant to be looking at the earliest of early drafts. Beta readers are meant to be at the end of the process, after you've done all the work that you possibly can to develop the manuscript and think about all of these things, including issues such as defamation, possibility, right? The beta readers should be getting the cleanest of clean versions that you can possibly provide them, so that you're not having to ask yourself like, well, who do they know and who are they going to go talk to, and are they going to pass around that juicy scene that I drafted that, you know, doesn't make anybody look good, right? Like, so, you know, you need to be thinking about the timing of when you're involving beta readers in terms of the development of the manuscript kind of in general.
Also, and it goes back to, it includes all of those issues that you were raising earlier in terms of the complexity of the publishing choices, right? So you should have a clear, and see, this is how I get into like marketing and PR with my clients. You should have a clear idea of where this manuscript, where this book is going to sit on the shelf before you show it to beta readers. Beta readers shouldn't be figuring that out for you. You should have a clear message so that they know what they're reading, and then they can tell you whether it slots in there or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Jen, I have a question for you actually. As a part of your publishing process, do you always put your nonfiction manuscripts through like a defamation review? Or is that like case by case? Like you see a manuscript, you think it's kind of hot for some issues, then maybe you tap a lawyer.
It's case by case.
Okay.
So, you know, if something seems amiss, a lot of times the authors kind of, there's like some inkling that they know that they might need somebody to take a look. They might need like some kind of legal review.
Yeah.
Other times it's the editors who are doing their job and they're like, hey, Jen, you might want to have somebody look into this because there's a couple of areas that are not going to go well if this goes out as is, but it's not their job necessarily because they weren't a developmental editor, for example. And so that's when I'll be able to kind of pop in to say, okay, nobody wants a lawsuit here. So we need you to rework this or go talk to a lawyer who will give you the go ahead. And so we've had, out of the 250-ish books we've published, I would say maybe a dozen of them have had to do like a full legal read. And there are like really specific reasons for that. But others have consulted with attorneys just to kind of avoid that. And a lot of times it's just like, it's a single paragraph. It's not like the whole thing. It's just this tiny little spot that could be the thing that sets it over the edge. And I certainly don't want a lawsuit.
Right. And then if it's just a tiny little spot, let's circle back to the very first thing I said, rephrase in terms of an opinion. Okay. Yeah. Just if it's that tiny little spot, right, let's soften it. Yeah. Those can be solved easily.
Yeah. I think, you know, one of the things that I want to underscore here, especially as this conversation, unfortunately, is coming to an end. I feel like we could talk about this for another hour at least, is something, again, that Jen and I often say in all of our other episodes, which is that authors, do your due diligence to choose really wise publishing partners. So, you know, choosing a developmental editor who will have an eye towards some of these issues. Are they the legal expertise? No, but they should know enough to question something that's happening on the page and to suggest a correction or to suggest the consultation with an attorney who knows better to make sure that everybody's covering their butt, right? Choose the publisher who's also going to know enough to ask the right questions and point you in the right resources. And you yourself as the author should also be watching videos like this or reading articles and doing your own homework to also be able to come to those publishers and ask them, what do they think? Or going directly to an attorney and asking for their expertise, their consult, you know, whatever it is. It is a team sport, but at the end of the day, you're the author. Your name is the one that's going on the book. You're the one who has to stand and represent it, regardless of all the people who help you get the thing published on the other end. So please, please, please do your due diligence, access your resources, ask questions, pick the right partners, like go above and beyond, because your book is out there for a while. And is there a statute on limitations for bringing forth defamation lawsuits?
Yes, there is a statute of limitations. Now, the thing to know about defamation and other areas we haven't spoken about, invasion of privacy and rights of publicity, is there is a statute of limitations, but these are state law claims, all right? And we have 50 states plus territories, right? And so the statute of limitations is going to be different in every single state. And the elements of defamation and what has to be proved can vary slightly in every single state. And so you have to do an analysis of which state law is going to apply. So if the author's living in New York, but grew up in Rhode Island, and the person who caused the trauma is in Florida, you have to sort through which state law is going to apply and which statute of limitations is going to apply.
Wow, I never would have thought of that, but good word, yeah. And it makes me sad that we didn't get a chance to do the invasion of privacy and rights of publicity, because I feel like, who knows? I don't even know what that. Well, I generally think I could figure it out, but like that seems like a whole other can of worms here.
Well, Catherine, I guess you're coming back in 2026, and we're going to do a part 2.
I think we have to,
because we also focused most of this on memoir, and we didn't really necessarily talk about things with prescriptive nonfiction where you might be quoting other people's thought leadership. You might be talking about companies or brands. Like, I mean, there are several other things to kind of unravel here for our nonfiction authors that we serve.
Well, if you're up for it, we'd love to have you back for a part 2, because
I would love to. This is fun. And next time you go to New Jersey, I'll drive up and meet you.
Even though that won't be halfway either.
I know. Well, Vermont is just so far away from Baltimore.
Yes.
It's 10 hours. 10 hours. Crazy. Connecticut's closer. And so I was in Vermont last month. I took the train from Baltimore, the Vermonter. It was so much fun. I had a blast.
Oh, cool. How long on the train though? Or was it 10 hours on the train?
Oh, it's 12 hours on the train, 10 hours in the car.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
It's probably beautiful this time of year though, because, you know, we're recording this in October, like the fall foliage, especially going through, you know, Connecticut through Mass and Vermont, is amazing.
Gorgeous. And the train goes right along the Connecticut River. I mean, It's absolutely beautiful train ride. Once you get past New Jersey and
New York.
And this wasn't even our best fall. Like, as a Vermonter, I can say that our foliage this year was a little bit dimmer than it.
Oh, you had that horrible drought.
Yeah. It did a number on like just the way that the season changed, how early it changed. Like, everything's a little muted in comparison to like the vibrancy that it can be.
Yeah.
There are little pockets like where, you know, the trees are still kind of singing.
Baltimore is doing full vibrancy this year. We had lots of rain. We're in a little bit of a drought now, but it was a pretty good season for the garden.
Yeah, nice. So you're at our last few minutes, so I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to promote the thing that they want to promote coming up. Catherine, what's coming up with you in Creative Law Center?
Okay, so next month's workshop. So I do monthly workshops in the Creative Law Center, and next month's workshop, which is on the third Thursday of the month, which is the Thursday before Thanksgiving, we're going to be talking about rights reversion. Yes, we are, and we're going to be talking about it in terms of what the copyright law says, which says after 35 years, you can get your rights back from a publisher, which has been going on in Hollywood quite a bit this year. And then we're also going to talk about rights reversion in publishing contracts. So that is the November workshop. And if your audience is interested, they should come to creativelawcenter.com, sign up for my list, and they will get an email about the workshops.
Awesome. Great topic.
Yeah, I'm excited personally.
Jen, what do you've got coming up?
Oh, I've got so many things happening. I would say my book. I know there's always something. I'm in the throes of my pre-orders for my new book, Promote Your Purpose. So you can go to promoteyourpurposebook.com. I have an amazing card deck that I have created that goes as a companion with the book. So if anyone is struggling with how to actually market the book that they wrote and they don't know what to do with it, this is the book that you need.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to give a shout out to the League of Vermont Writers. This is an organization in Vermont that serves Vermont writers across the state, but beyond. You don't have to be a Vermonter to be a part of the organization. We have our November event coming up on the 1st from 11 to 12:30, and it's a focus on flash writing. So for people who are not familiar with the term flash, a lot of people think that it's flash fiction and it's specific to fiction, but in fact, you can actually write flash nonfiction as well. Flash just is a way of saying to write short, to be succinct, to be punchy, and you can write all kinds of different prose using the flash kind of style. So we have a fabulous speaker coming, Grant Faulkner, the author of The Art of Brevity, and he'll be doing a 90-minute workshop on flash writing. So I'm going to put that into the comments for everyone, and would love to see people there.
Amazing. And then Ally, you and I are back on November 13th. And I believe our topic is, what metrics should I use to define my success as an author? So if folks are looking for some content around defining success, we'll be here on November 13th at 10 a.m. Eastern time.
Yeah. And can you believe it? That's we're almost at the end of our second season.
Yeah.
Already. It'll be November. But we're pretty excited about 2026 because even though this is unscripted on the monthly level, we do have a plan going into next year. And we're pumped about it. So even if those photos that we took look like hell, and the rebrand might not quite work out the way that we had planned, we are excited about next year's content, and we're thrilled that we already have a guest speaker lined up for 2026.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Catherine. This has been just amazing. I learned so much. And as Ally said earlier in the episode, I love doing this because I always learn something new. So it's just so fantastic to be a sponge listening to all of your wisdom. So thank you for that.
Extra thanks to people in the comments for their questions, for their engagement, and keep them coming. As you catch this replay over on LinkedIn or YouTube, please go ahead, post new things that are coming to you in the comments, and one of us will be sure to check and do our best to respond.
All right.
And that's a wrap for today.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Bye.